Bound by rope, freed by love, the cowboy who gave her back her soul. The morning sun rose slowly over the small town, painting the dusty streets with soft golden light. Birds chirped faintly, and the smell of fresh hay mixed with the faint scent of smoke from distant chimneys. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, staring out of the cracked window, feeling the weight of another day pressing down on her shoulders. The sunlight should have felt warm, inviting, like a promise of hope. But for Emily, it only reminded her of the cage she had been living in all her life, the invisible ropes of fear and hurt that tied her heart and mind. She ran a hand through her hair and let out a slow sigh. Life had never been gentle with her. Every decision she made seemed to trap her further in pain. Her mother had left when she was very young, and her father, though well-meaning in his own way, had been distant and harsh. He believed in hard work and discipline, not comfort or affection. And so, Emily had grown up learning to rely only on herself, building walls around her feelings so that no one could ever hurt her the way life had. Today was no different from any other day. She had chores to do, errands to run, and a sense of unease that clung to her like a shadow. Even simple tasks felt like mountains to climb. Her small home, cozy but worn, felt emptier than usual, the silence pressing on her ears. It was a life of routine, predictable and lonely, and she was beginning to wonder if she would ever feel anything more. The first sound of the day that broke her trance was the rumble of hooves in the distance. She turned her head slightly, curious despite herself. A cowboy was riding slowly along the dirt road, the early sunlight glinting off the leather of his boots and the brim of his hat. He moved with a calm confidence that seemed natural, not forced. There was something about the way he carried himself, steady, grounded, yet gentle, that drew Emily's attention, even though she didn't know why. Jake had lived in the area his whole life, working the ranches that spread across the hills and valleys surrounding the town. People often called him quiet, some even said intimidating, but those who truly knew him understood that his strength was matched by a kind heart. He had learned from years of hard work what it meant to be patient, to listen, and to care without expecting anything in return. Today, like most mornings, he was out checking the fences, ensuring the livestock were safe, and making sure everything on his land ran smoothly. Emily watched him from her window, her curiosity piqued. There was a calmness about him, a sense of purpose that contrasted sharply with her own chaotic thoughts. She had seen men like him before, strong and dependable, yet always at a distance. For some reason, Jake felt different. She couldn't explain it, not yet, but something inside her stirred, a tiny flicker of hope she hadn't felt in years. Her day unfolded slowly, each task reminding her of her solitude. Feeding the chickens, fetching water from the well, sweeping the floor, washing clothes by hand. All these simple chores carried the weight of her loneliness. She moved through them mechanically, her mind elsewhere, replaying memories she wished she could forget. Each memory felt like a chain around her heart, tightening with every thought. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, she heard the sound of hooves again, closer this time. She glanced up just in time to see Jake dismounting near her fence. He carried a calm, unhurried energy, like someone who belonged to the land itself. He waved politely, tipping his hat, and Emily felt a strange flutter in her chest. She quickly looked away, pretending she hadn't noticed, but her heart was already racing. Jake approached the fence with a smile that was easy and genuine. "Morning," he said. His voice was deep, steady, carrying the kind of warmth that made people feel safe. "Looks like you've got your hands full today." Emily's initial instinct was to brush him off, to retreat into the protective shell she had built around herself. But something about him made her hesitate. Maybe it was the kindness in his eyes or the way he didn't rush her, didn't demand anything. She simply nodded. "Morning." "Yeah, chores never end around here." Her voice sounded colder than she intended, but she couldn't help it. Jake leaned on the fence, giving her space but staying close enough that his presence felt reassuring. "I've got some extra hands today," he said casually. "Thought I'd offer, no pressure." Emily's instinct was to refuse. She wasn't used to accepting help, hadn't been for as long as she could remember. But there was something different in the way he spoke, not pitying her, not looking down on her, just offering. For the first time in a long while, she felt a small crack in the walls she had built around herself. I'll manage," she said softly, almost to herself, but Jake shook his head gently. "Sometimes managing isn't enough," he said simply. "Sometimes we all need someone beside us." There was a pause, the kind that holds meaning beyond words. Emily found herself thinking of all the times she had faced struggles alone, of all the fear and doubt that had kept her from truly living. Could she allow herself a moment of trust? Could she let someone in even if just a little? Finally, she gave a small nod, almost imperceptible. "Okay," she said, and just like that, a tiny thread of connection was formed, delicate but real. Jake smiled and picked up a bucket. "Let's start with the well," he said. "It's heavier than it looks, but I can show you a trick to make it easier." As they worked side by side, Emily noticed how natural it felt to have someone nearby who didn't judge her, didn't rush her, didn't expect her to be perfect. Jake shared small stories about life on the ranch, about his family, about the simple joys of the land, and she found herself laughing quietly at moments she hadn't laughed in years. There was a warmth spreading through her chest, cautious but undeniable, a feeling she had long thought lost. By the time the morning chores were done, the sun was high, casting long shadows across the yard. Emily felt a sense of accomplishment, not just from the work itself, but from allowing herself to let someone in, even if only for a few hours. Jake gathered his things to leave, tipping his hat again. "See you around," he said with a smile that promised patience, understanding, and maybe more. Emily watched him ride away, a strange mix of emotions swirling inside her: hope, fear, curiosity, and a budding sense of trust. For the first time in a long while, she realized that life didn't have to be endured alone. There was a possibility of connection, of someone who could walk beside her through the hardships rather than leaving her to face them alone. As she returned to her house, she felt the day's sunlight differently now, not harsh and relentless, but soft and full of quiet promise. She didn't know what the future held, didn't know if she could fully trust again, but the small spark ignited by a simple act of kindness made her heart lighter. Emily had begun a journey she hadn't realized she was ready for, a journey where she could slowly start reclaiming pieces of herself she had thought were lost forever. By the time evening fell, the golden hues of sunset spilling across the town, Emily sat by the window again, looking out at the horizon. She thought of Jake, the quiet cowboy who had unknowingly shown her that even the smallest gestures could break through the heaviest chains. And for the first time in years, Emily allowed herself to imagine something different, something better. A life where fear didn't rule her, where love wasn't a distant dream but a possibility waiting to be embraced. The stars began to twinkle in the sky one by one, and Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't known before. The rope of her past still lingered, but the knot was loosening. And somewhere deep in her heart, she knew that if she could take this first step, there would be more steps to come, each one bringing her closer to freedom, closer to herself, and closer to a love that could truly set her soul free. That night, Emily went to bed with a faint smile, a fragile hope tucked quietly in her chest. Tomorrow would bring more chores, more challenges, more uncertainties, but also the possibility of connection, the chance that someone like Jake could walk beside her, showing her that the world wasn't just a place of pain, but also of healing and unexpected kindness. And as sleep claimed her, the last thought lingering in her mind was simple but powerful. Maybe, just maybe, life could be different, and she was ready to see how. After that morning when Jake had helped Emily with her chores, life began to feel a little different for her. The days were still long, the chores still demanding, and the weight of her past still pressed heavily on her heart. But now there was a new presence in her life, quiet yet steady, that made her feel less alone. Jake didn't intrude, he didn't rush or demand. He simply showed up, offering small acts of kindness and support, and slowly Emily began to notice how much that mattered. It started with small moments. Jake would wave to her from the fence as he rode by on his horse, or he would stop to help with a stubborn task she was struggling with. Sometimes, he would bring over supplies she needed for her chores, or offer advice on how to make the work a little easier. At first, Emily tried to resist, telling herself that she didn't need anyone's help. She was used to handling life on her own. But deep down, she felt a warmth she hadn't known in years, a sense that someone genuinely cared for her well-being. One afternoon, the sun was high and harsh, beating down on the dry earth. Emily struggled with a heavy bucket of water, her arms shaking from the weight. She tried to ignore the strain, but a sudden slip almost caused the bucket to fall. Before she could react, Jake was there, steadying the bucket with his strong hands. "Careful," he said, his voice calm but firm. "You don't have to do everything alone." Emily looked up at him, startled by the intensity of his gaze. She felt a mix of embarrassment and gratitude. I can manage, she stammered, trying to regain her composure, but Jake just shook his head gently. Sometimes managing isn't enough. Sometimes having someone by your side makes all the difference. That simple moment stayed with Emily. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she didn't feel completely alone. She didn't have to hide behind walls and distance herself from others to feel safe. Jake's presence was steady, reassuring, and patient. He didn't push her, he simply gave her space while letting her know he was there. Over the next few weeks, their connection grew naturally. Emily began to share small pieces of her life with Jake, stories of her childhood, her struggles, the loneliness she had carried for so long. Jake listened without judgment, never interrupting, never offering empty platitudes. He simply let her speak, giving her a safe space to release the pain she had bottled up for years. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Emily found herself opening up about something she had never shared with anyone. Her voice trembled as she recounted moments of betrayal and neglect, the times she had felt powerless and lost. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't stop. She felt the weight of years lifting slightly as she spoke, knowing that someone was truly listening. Jake stayed with her until the tears dried, offering a comforting presence without forcing words. "You've been carrying this for a long time," he said softly. "It's okay to let it out. You don't have to face it alone anymore." Emily nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. For the first time, she felt that maybe it was possible to heal, to let go of some of the pain that had defined her for so long. And yet, old fears lingered. She had been hurt before, and trust didn't come easily. She wondered if she was ready to fully open her heart to someone else, even someone as kind as Jake. Conflict soon arrived in the form of reminders from her past. People who had hurt her, intentionally or not, began to resurface. A distant relative who had always looked down on her made cutting remarks, and a former friend's betrayal reminded her of the dangers of letting anyone too close. These encounters triggered old fears and doubts, and Emily felt the familiar weight of despair pressing in again. One particularly difficult day, after facing a harsh reminder of her past, Emily sat on the porch, feeling the old anxiety creep back. She looked out at the open fields, wishing she could escape from the memories that haunted her. Jake, sensing her distress, approached slowly, giving her space but remaining nearby. "You don't have to face this alone," he said quietly. "I'm here whenever you're ready." Emily shook her head, tears threatening to spill. "I don't know if I can do this," she admitted. "Every time I try, something pulls me back. Maybe I'm not strong enough." Jake sat beside her, close but not pressing. "Strength isn't about never feeling fear. Strength is about facing it, even when it scares you. You've already taken steps you didn't think you could take. That counts for more than you realize." Emily looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the patience and care in his eyes. She realized that he wasn't judging her, wasn't expecting her to be perfect. He simply believed in her, even when she struggled to believe in herself. The next days were a mix of small victories and lingering doubts. Emily began to allow herself to feel moments of joy without guilt. She laughed at Jake's stories, marveled at the sunsets over the hills, and even attempted a few small projects she had avoided for years, like fixing a broken fence or tending to a neglected garden patch. Each small success gave her confidence, a sense that maybe life could be different. But the true test came unexpectedly. One evening, Emily received a letter from someone connected to her past, stirring old fears and insecurities. The letter's words were sharp, critical, and filled with reminders of all the ways she had felt powerless. She felt the familiar urge to flee, to escape from the town and the life she was trying to rebuild. Jake noticed her distress immediately. "What's wrong?" he asked gently. Emily shook her head, unsure if she could explain. "It's from the past. I can't handle it right now." Jake reached out and took her hand, not forcefully, just firmly enough to let her know she wasn't alone. "You don't have to run from it," he said. "We can face it together if you want. You've already come so far. Don't let fear take it all away." Emily hesitated, torn between the instinct to retreat and the desire to trust. She thought of the mornings they had spent working side by side, the conversations they had shared, the quiet support he had offered without expecting anything in return. Slowly, she nodded, allowing herself to lean on him just for this moment. Together, they walked through her fears, discussing the letter, the memories it stirred, and the feelings she had tried to bury. Jake didn't offer easy solutions or promises he couldn't keep. He simply stood beside her, listening, understanding, and giving her the courage to confront the pain instead of running from it. By the time they were done, the sky was dark, and the stars began to twinkle faintly above the hills. Emily felt exhausted but lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from her chest. She realized that trust and love weren't about being free from fear or pain. They were about having someone who would stand with you, even when the world felt overwhelming. The bond between Emily and Jake grew stronger with each passing day. She began to let herself feel again, joy, hope, and even a cautious sense of anticipation for the future. For the first time in years, she imagined a life where she wasn't defined by her past, where fear didn't control her every decision, and where love could be something safe, not just a dream. One afternoon, as they worked together in the garden, Emily paused and looked at Jake. "Thank you," she said softly, almost afraid to speak, "for being here, for not letting me run away from myself." Jake smiled, brushing dirt from his hands. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "You're doing all the hard work, I'm just walking beside you." Emily felt a warmth in her chest, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in a long time. It wasn't romantic yet, not fully, but it was something more important, a sense of safety, of trust, of being seen and understood. As the sun set behind the hills, casting golden shadows across the land, Emily realized that life was slowly changing. She wasn't running anymore, not entirely. She was learning to face her fears, to open her heart in small ways, and to trust that someone could care for her without expecting her to be perfect. That evening, she sat on the porch, watching the stars appear one by one. She thought of her past, of the struggles and pain she had endured, but she didn't feel trapped by it this time. Instead, she felt hope. Hope that life could be different, that love could be gentle and healing, and that she could finally begin to reclaim the parts of herself she had lost. Emily had learned an important lesson. True strength wasn't in facing life alone. It was in allowing someone to walk beside you, to offer support when the weight became too heavy, and to remind you that even in the darkest moments, you weren't truly alone. And so, with the stars twinkling above and the cool evening air wrapping around her, Emily felt the first real sense of peace she had known in years. The rope of her past was still there, tangled and worn, but she was learning to loosen it, one small step at a time, guided by the steady, patient presence of the cowboy who had shown her that love could be gentle, steadfast, and freeing. For Emily, this was only the beginning, but it was a beginning filled with hope, trust, and the possibility that the future might finally belong to her, not her past. Emily had begun to feel the first hints of hope and trust, thanks to Jake's gentle presence and patience. But life had a way of testing even the strongest resolve, and the past she had tried to leave behind was far from done with her. One crisp morning, she woke to the sound of a letter sliding under her door. Her heart sank before she even picked it up. The handwriting was familiar, stirring memories she had buried deep. Her hands trembled as she opened it, and as she read, a wave of fear and anxiety washed over her. The letter carried words that cut deep, criticism, judgment, and reminders of every failure she had ever felt. It was as though the writer had studied her weaknesses and then carefully strung them together to make her feel small, powerless, and unworthy. For a moment, Emily felt the old panic rising in her chest. Her first instinct was to run, to escape the town, the memories, and the person she had once been. The rope of the past was tightening around her, and she felt herself slipping back into the fear she had fought so hard to escape. Jake, as always, noticed immediately. He had stopped by to check on her chores, and when he saw her face, pale and shaken, he knew something was wrong. "Emily," he said softly, approaching her carefully. "What happened?" Emily shook her head, her voice barely a whisper. It's nothing. I can handle it." But she knew deep down that she couldn't. The letter had reopened wounds she hadn't realized were still raw, and the fear of being trapped by her past all over again made her want to flee. Jake knelt beside her, not touching her but close enough that she could feel his support. "You don't have to face this alone," he said firmly but gently. "Whatever it is, we can face it together." She looked at him, fear and doubt flickering across her eyes. I don't know if I can," she admitted. "Every time I try to move forward, something pulls me back. Maybe I'm not strong enough." Jake's voice was calm, steady, and unwavering. "Strength isn't about never feeling fear. Strength is about facing it even when it scares you. You've already come so far, don't let this letter take it all away." Emily hesitated, feeling the rope of her past tighten around her heart. But there was something in Jake's eyes, a patience, a belief in her that she had almost forgotten existed. Slowly, she nodded. She didn't feel entirely ready, but for the first time in years, she felt that maybe she didn't have to face her fears alone. Together, they spent the day confronting the memories the letter had stirred. Emily recounted each painful experience, every hurtful word, every failure she had endured. She spoke of times she had felt powerless, neglected, and unloved. Jake listened without judgment, offering encouragement through his presence, his quiet words, and the steady reassurance that she was not alone. By evening, Emily felt exhausted but also lighter, as though a small weight had been lifted from her chest. She realized that confronting her fears with someone by her side was far less terrifying than facing them alone. She still had a long way to go, but for the first time, she could imagine moving forward without the rope of her past pulling her down. But life's challenges were not done. A few days later, a storm rolled through the town. Rain lashed against the windows and wind howled through the streets. Emily's small home creaked under the pressure of the storm, and she felt the familiar stirrings of fear once more. The storm seemed to echo the chaos she had carried inside her for so long. She tried to calm herself, but memories of helplessness and isolation surged back. Jake appeared at her door, soaked from the rain but determined. "I thought you might need some help," he said, holding a bundle of supplies. "We'll get through this together." Emily opened the door, shivering from both the cold and the anxiety that had gripped her. For a moment she considered shutting it, retreating into herself as she had done so many times before. But then she looked at Jake, the way he had never judged her, the way he had stood beside her through every small struggle, and she stepped aside. "Okay," she said softly. "Let's face it together." Through the storm, they worked side by side, securing the house, checking the animals, and keeping each other warm. Jake's calm presence gave Emily a sense of stability she had never known. She realized that fear could be faced not by fleeing, but by standing firm with someone she trusted. By the time the storm passed, she felt a new strength rising within her, a resilience born not just of courage, but of trust and support. Emily's journey toward healing was not linear. There were days when doubt and fear returned, testing her resolve. Sometimes she felt like running back to the safety of isolation, to the familiar pain that had defined her for so long. But Jake's steady presence reminded her that she didn't have to face life alone, that she could let someone walk beside her without losing herself. One pivotal afternoon, Emily decided to confront a memory she had avoided for years. It was painful, a moment when she had felt utterly powerless and betrayed. She had never spoken about it to anyone, not even to herself. But now, with Jake by her side, she felt a spark of courage. She told him the story, recounting the fear, the helplessness, and the sorrow that had haunted her. Jake listened quietly, never interrupting, never offering empty words. When she finished, he placed a hand over hers. "You faced it," he said simply. "You didn't run. You didn't hide. That's real courage, Emily." Tears welled in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. For the first time, she felt that she could truly face her past without being consumed by it. The rope that had bound her for so long was loosening, thread by thread. With Jake's support, Emily began to take small steps toward reclaiming her life. She worked on the ranch, learning new skills, tending to the animals, and repairing fences. Each task was a test of her confidence and resilience, but with Jake by her side, she discovered a strength she hadn't known she possessed. One evening, while riding a horse across the open fields, Emily felt a sense of freedom she had never experienced before. The wind whipped against her face, the stars began to twinkle above, and she realized that the past no longer had the power to define her. She was still healing, still learning, but she was no longer trapped by fear. Jake rode beside her, guiding the horse with gentle hands. "You're stronger than you think," he said, "and you're not alone anymore, remember that." Emily nodded, feeling the truth in his words. She had come a long way, but the journey was far from over. There would be challenges, moments of doubt, and days when the rope of the past threatened to tighten again. But she had learned that she didn't have to face them alone, that courage was not the absence of fear, but the willingness to move forward despite it. As they returned to the ranch, Emily felt a quiet pride in herself. She had faced memories she had long avoided, confronted fears that had held her back, and begun to reclaim the life she deserved. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that trust and love could be a source of strength, not weakness. That night, as she lay in bed, Emily reflected on the journey so far. The past had been painful, the rope tight and unyielding, but the present was different. She had someone who believed in her, who walked beside her, and who reminded her that she was worthy of love, trust, and happiness. She realized that healing was not a single moment, but a series of steps, each one bringing her closer to freedom. And for the first time in years, Emily felt that freedom within reach. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to imagine a future where the rope of the past no longer bound her, where love and trust were not distant dreams, but realities she could embrace. Emily's journey in Part 3 was the turning point. She had faced the deepest wounds of her past, confronted fear and doubt head-on, and discovered a resilience she had never known. The rope that had bound her for so long was loosening, and with Jake's steady presence, she was learning to walk forward into a life of hope, courage, and the promise of love that could heal even the most broken parts of her soul. Emily had faced the hardest days of her life. She had stared into the darkness of her past, confronted memories that had haunted her for years, and faced fears that had once seemed impossible to overcome. And through it all, Jake had been there, steady, patient, unwavering. But now, in this final chapter of her journey, Emily felt something she had almost forgotten, a sense of freedom. It was a bright morning, the sky painted with soft hues of gold and blue. Emily stood in the fields, feeling the breeze brush against her face. The horses grazed nearby, the gentle swish of their tails and the soft sounds of the farm filling the air. She had learned to find peace in these small moments, to recognize the beauty and calm that existed alongside life's challenges. And she felt a quiet pride in herself, for the journey she had made, for the courage she had found within. Jake approached, his horse walking slowly beside her. He had always been a man of few words, but his presence alone spoke volumes. He had shown her what it meant to trust again, to allow someone into her life without fear of judgment. And today, as he dismounted and walked to stand beside her, Emily realized just how much she had changed. "You look different today," Jake said softly, a small smile tugging at his lips. Emily laughed lightly, the sound free and easy. "Different in a good way, I hope?" Jake nodded. "Absolutely, you're lighter, stronger. You've come so far, Emily. I'm proud of you." She felt warmth spread through her chest. Pride, yes, but also something deeper, a sense of belonging, of connection. She had once believed that she was destined to face life alone, that trust and love were dangerous and fleeting, but Jake had taught her otherwise. He had walked beside her, given her the space to heal, and reminded her that she was worthy of kindness, of care, of love. Over the next few days, Emily began to embrace life with a newfound confidence. She worked on the ranch, tending to the animals and learning new skills. She laughed more easily, finding joy in the simple pleasures of the land. And slowly, she allowed herself to imagine a future that was not defined by fear or the shadows of her past, but by hope, resilience, and the love she had discovered with Jake. One afternoon, they faced a challenge together that symbolized the changes in Emily's life. A young foal had become stuck in a muddy area near the edge of the pasture. Emily's first instinct would have been panic, to freeze or step back in fear. But now, with the strength she had built and Jake by her side, she acted. "Careful," Jake said, positioning himself near the foal. "We'll get it out together. Just follow my lead." Emily nodded, taking a deep breath. She remembered the lessons of courage and patience she had learned over the past months. Step by step, they guided the foal to safety, careful not to startle it. When the foal finally stumbled free, Emily felt a surge of triumph, not just for rescuing the animal, but for recognizing the power and resilience she had found in herself. "That was amazing," Jake said, his eyes shining with pride. "You didn't hesitate, you faced it head-on." Emily smiled, feeling a quiet sense of accomplishment. "I had a great teacher," she said. The days grew longer, warmer, and filled with the rhythm of life on the ranch. Emily and Jake spent their time together in simple ways, working the land, sharing meals, riding horses, and talking long into the evenings. These moments were unhurried, genuine, and deeply comforting. Emily found herself opening up to laughter, sharing dreams she had kept hidden, and discovering joy she had thought she had lost forever. And then came the evening that marked the true turning point of her journey. Emily stood on the hill overlooking the ranch, the sun sinking behind the horizon and casting a golden glow over the fields. She felt the cool breeze on her face, the sound of the animals settling in for the night, and the quiet strength of the land around her. For the first time, she realized that she was free, not just from fear or past pain, but free in her heart, her mind, and her spirit. Jake joined her, standing silently beside her. They watched the sunset together, and for a moment, no words were necessary. The trust and connection between them spoke louder than any speech, louder than any promise. Emily felt a profound gratitude, not just for Jake, but for herself, for the courage it had taken to face the past, for the determination to heal, and for the willingness to allow love into her life. "You've changed my life," Emily said softly, turning to him. "You've shown me that it's possible to be safe, to trust, and to love again." Jake smiled, a mixture of warmth and quiet pride in his expression. "You did the hard work, Emily. I just walked beside you. You found the strength that was always inside you." Emily felt tears welling in her eyes, but this time they were tears of joy. She had walked a path that once seemed impossible, faced the shadows of her past, and emerged stronger, braver, and ready to embrace the future. She realized that true healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about reclaiming herself, step by step, with courage, patience, and the support of someone who truly cared. Over the following weeks, Emily continued to grow, both in confidence and in her connection with Jake. Their bond deepened naturally, built on trust, shared experiences, and a mutual respect that neither had known before. Love blossomed slowly, gently, and without fear, a love that was rooted in understanding and care rather than expectation or pressure. One quiet evening, as the stars began to twinkle in the sky, Emily and Jake sat together on the porch of the farmhouse. The air was cool, filled with the scent of hay and earth, and the world seemed peaceful. Emily rested her head on Jake's shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart and the reassurance of his presence. "I never thought I could feel this way again," she whispered. "I thought my heart was lost, that I'd never trust or hope again, but you've shown me that life can be gentle, that love can heal, and that I'm stronger than I realized." Jake wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. "You were always strong," he said. "You just needed to see it for yourself, and now you can live fully, love fully, and be free." Emily closed her eyes, taking a deep breath of the cool night air. She felt a sense of peace and completeness she had never known. The rope of her past, once tight and suffocating, had loosened completely. She was no longer bound by fear or old pain. She was free, not just because of Jake, but because she had found the courage within herself to face life, to trust, and to embrace love. The days that followed were filled with moments of joy, laughter, and simple pleasures. Emily tended the ranch, rode horses, and spent quiet evenings talking with Jake. Each day was a reminder that life could be beautiful, that healing was possible, and that love, when patient and kind, could truly restore a soul. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the fields, she reflected on her journey. The past had been difficult, filled with pain and fear, but it had also shaped her into the person she had become. She had learned resilience, courage, and the power of trust. And most importantly, she had learned that no matter how dark the past, there was always the possibility of a brighter future. Jake appeared beside her, smiling. "Thinking about the past?" he asked. Emily nodded, but with a smile of her own. "Yes, but not with fear. With gratitude for everything I've learned, for the courage I've found, and for the love I've discovered." Jake reached for her hand, holding it gently. "Then we move forward," he said, "together." And together they walked across the fields, the sun casting long shadows behind them, the world filled with possibility, and Emily's heart finally at peace. She had been bound by the pain of her past, but love had freed her. She had reclaimed her soul, her strength, and her hope. And as she looked at the horizon, she knew that this was only the beginning of a life filled with courage, joy, and the kind of love that could heal even the deepest wounds. In the quiet moments that followed, Emily understood a truth she had once doubted. That freedom and happiness were not distant dreams, but realities she could hold in her hands. The rope of her past had been loosened, the shadows of fear had faded, and the light of hope had returned. She had faced life's challenges, healed her wounds, and discovered the strength within herself to embrace a future filled with trust, courage, and love. And in Jake's steady presence, she knew that she would never have to face life alone again. The cowboy who had walked beside her, who had shown her patience, kindness, and unwavering care, had helped her reclaim the parts of herself she had thought were lost. Together they would face whatever life had to offer, their hearts open, their spirits free, and their souls bound not by fear, but by the gentle, healing power of love.